Peter Hitchens had an arresting column in the Mail the other day. Enough with these interminable Scottish, Irish, Welsh nationalists whinging decade in, decade out. Why don't the English secede from the United Kingdom and leave these eternally dissatisfied Celts to take it out on each other? Peter Hitchens joins me now. Peter, it was a very clever column because you rooted it really in the romantic restoration of the Kingdom of England, which was a very great thing.
Well, it was, and I don't see why we shouldn't have it back. I think it would be a great moment for reflection, restoration, and understanding of who and what we are. I don't imagine that if England did pull out of the United Kingdom and re-establish itself as what it was, that it would continue to behave in the way that it has done for some long time as the United Kingdom. One of the things that I hope to do, apart from enjoying the look on Nicola Sturgeon's face when she realised that Scotland really was independent and had to cope with that, one of the things I wanted to do was to get England to accept its standing in the world. We had the most tremendous period of world power. I don't think any country of such a small size has ever been so powerful or so rich. But it's over, and we need to find a new place in the world in which we can be content. And I think a recognition that we're now a smaller nation would be an important way of pulling ourselves together and re-establishing ourselves as what we used to be. You look around at the nations of Europe, it's the smaller ones which don't pretend to be world powers and go stomping about in other people's countries that seem to be more content and happier and more prosperous than the ones which do. I'm sick and tired of us invading everywhere. And I think we should look to our own defences to make sure no one comes and barges into us, and otherwise leave the rest of the world alone. We've had our turn, and if it's now the turn of the Chinese, the main thing to do is to be as well defended against them as you possibly can, both militarily and culturally and economically, if you want to survive the storms that are coming. And I think a smaller country would probably do that better than the mess which is the United Kingdom, a group of nations which no longer wishes to stay together. Why hang around? Why wait to be jilted? Why stand there on the street corner with a wilting bunch of flowers waiting to be told to shove off?
Yeah, that's very true. It's the serious point. I think you're right about smaller nations. When you look at Slovenia or Slovakia, they just get to live their lives unperturbed by the cross currents of great power politics. But it's also true, isn't it, that Britishness is was really something that depends on size. And all around the world, people who used to think, I made this point to Neil Oliver, that Australia used to think of itself as the British nation in the South Pacific and Canada as the British nation in North America. And we saw on the Caribbean tour of William and Kate that those islands don't think of themselves as British anymore. So is that whole concept one that has totally outlived its day?
Well, I think so. It's 20 years now since I wrote my book, The Abolition of Britain, which when I wrote it was supposed to be a plea against this process. I thought it could be stopped. But I came to discover during the years that followed that actually there wasn't any particularly strong desire to keep Britain in being. And I'm the most sentimental person I know, and I love to mull over old things and to think of how good they could have been if they'd survived. But I'm not a nostalgist. I don't believe that the dead past can be recreated. And I think if we are to have any sort of hope at all, then it has to consist, apart from anything else, in the recognition of reality. And Britain has gone. I'm a child of the post-war years when Britain was still a very strong idea, and the countries of the Union and the countries of the Commonwealth had fought together against a very wicked enemy and felt a strong sense of togetherness. But no one can say that hasn't dissipated, because it has. And so what are we going to rely on? It seems to me, I still thrill at the great speech of Queen Elizabeth, the first Queen Elizabeth at Tilbury at the Armada, that when she says that I may be only a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. And I thrill to hear the word England spoken in that way. If you think about it, English is probably the only language of its size and importance which doesn't have an actual nation coterminous with it. We don't have. England exists only as a guidebook fantasy or a historic curiosity. It doesn't exist as a political fact. Even in the United Kingdom, where Scotland's a political fact, and Wales is a political fact, and Northern Ireland is a political fact, and London increasingly is a political fact, England has no such thing. It has to make do with sharing its parliament with other people. And it has no national flag, and there is no English passport. I think the time has come to say, all right, well, if the other parts of the United Kingdom don't want to stay, then I don't want to keep them against their will. I'd love it if they did wish to stay. And even when they go, I say we should keep a light burning. I have no enmity towards them. I think they're great neighbours to have. But if they want to go, then why don't we just stop waiting around and follow their example and go our own way too?
Are you surprised that Tony Blair, who a quarter century ago started all these little devolved toy town parliaments in Edinburgh and Belfast and Cardiff, but was very clear at the time it was not an option for England, and I think he proposed at one point sort of regional assemblies from regions nobody knew where they were, like West Mercia North and things like that, just invented identities. Are you surprised that he managed to suppress it for so long?
No, I think that the problem was that people were so complacent. They didn't think any of this would do any damage. Many people in New Labour believed that if they had these new parliaments. Remember, by the way, the Stormont Parliament is much older than the others for a very interesting reason, which we might discuss. But they thought these new parliaments would just let off a safety valve rather than accelerating what was at that time quite a small trend of actual nationalism. Nationalism, I have to say, within the European Union. None of these new nations imagined they would go off entirely on their own. They all saw themselves as having a future as smaller countries within the EU, which I obviously don't. But England couldn't exist in that arrangement. The European Union is the enemy of federations on its own territory. The United Kingdom was a federation, which of course required some sort of loyalty from the capitals and peoples of the member nations to London. And what the European Union wants is for them to have direct fealty to Brussels. And so anything as big as England, on the other hand, they can't do that. It's too big to be absorbed. And therefore it has to be cut up into regions, as Germany is cut up into regions. You know, when you come into when the European Union stopped at the German frontier with Poland, which I can remember coming across into it, the first thing you saw was a sign saying "Welcome to the European Union." The second thing you saw was a fairly large sign saying "Welcome to the state of Brandenburg," and in tiny little letters about a mile further up the motorway was a sign saying "Welcome to Germany," and that summed up the European Union. It was trying to abolish the great nations, and they had no place in it. One of the things I had against it, really.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But it's true that England and even the United Kingdom is a much older entity than the national state of Germany. This is a great topic, Peter, and I hope it catches on, and I'll be very interested to learn whether your readers at the Mail and our viewers here like the idea, because if the Scots, Welsh and the Irish get to do it, the English should at least get in that game too. Peter Hitchens, thank you very much. Let us close it out with a bit of stuff. Well, this one from Nicholas is pretty good, actually. I've been saying England should leave the UK for years. I'm from Yorkshire, which is a bigger population than Scotland, but we get nowhere near the amount per head they receive. The union doesn't work for us. Yorkshire should be independent. Oh, come on. Yorkshire shouldn't be independent. The East Riding and the North Riding and the West Riding should all be independent. There's three nations right there for you.